aren't a lot of pipes and wires. It might be where there's a bathroom, there'll be some pipes, but they usually didn't run the wiring through that crawl space. So you see the wiring running through the walls and through the attics more frequently.
Well,
because no one wants to go in that crawl space even when the house is being built, right?
Exactly.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. I'm Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Fine Homebuilding Editorial Advisor Mike Girton.
Hello.
Fine Homebuilding Technical Editor Mark Peterson.
Hello.
And Fine Homebuilding Senior Editor Jeff Rose.
Howdy.
You can find Fine Homebuilding. You can find podcast and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Please email your questions and feedback to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. Guys, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, good morning. Always a pleasure. And it was nice. It's nice to speak with Mike. We've had, 100 emails back and forth, but it's nice to speak in person.
Yeah.
So you guys, I'm presuming, are working on the Ask the Experts department for the magazine. Is that right, Mark?
That's correct. Yep. And Mike is a rock star when it comes to that.
Yeah, but I'm usually,
I'm
usually pretty delinquent on getting back to Mark. I've got an email from him back from like April Fool's Day saying, okay, can you work on this one and this one? And it's still in my inbox.
Yeah, it's, and you probably edited some of Mike's content before, Patrick, but I don't know if you agree, but well, you probably wouldn't say if you didn't, but it's probably some of the content that I've edited the very least. Yeah. On a consistent basis. It's you
feel inadequate even touching it is how I would describe
what
it.
is my job again?
Yeah, but as any good writer knows, you need an editor to look over your shoulder because there's always something that you can either add to it or take away from it, or just taking a little tangent to some information that doesn't get adequately described. You need that extra set of eyes.
And you know what it is mostly is, because I mean, everything that Patrick and I do gets edited by several other people. So it's,
Thank God.
The funny thing is when you're writing something about what you know the most, it's almost harder because it's really hard to turn off that thing that assumption that other people know what you know. Mm-hmm. So, and then when somebody else reads your piece and then says, well, I don't even know what you're talking about here. I'm like, yeah, that's right. I guess you probably wouldn't know what I'm talking about. So
sometimes my knee-jerk reaction, and I have to check myself on it, is to be frustrated with like, why don't you know this?
Right.
And Carol has accused me of that before too. She's like, you think people know what you know, and that's a problem. Like, yeah, sure it is. Mike, you sent me a great photograph of a construction site. Do you want to talk about that, please?
Yeah, on Tuesday, I went to visit a Habitat for Humanity new house build that was being built by a local career tech center that I've been involved with for the past 15 years as an advisor on their advisory group and also doing trainings for the students. So it was great to get out on site with them for part of the afternoon and see the work that they've done.
Can you describe the house?
It's like a lot of the Habitat houses. It's a very compact house. It's a one-story, I think it's 3-bedroom, 1 bath or 1.5 bath. And I got involved last summer through Habitat. Their project manager had contacted me and they had ledge on the site. So they got granted, I think 10 or 12 building sites, which is, free land, which is great in a neighborhood in a fairly rural community. And with the housing demand and costs up so high, they got a lot of people who'd like to purchase a house. And but there was ledge on these lots, so they couldn't go very deep with the septic system or the foundation. So looking at opportunity to use a frost-protected shallow foundation. And the project manager had heard I knew a little bit about them, so I went and consulted with them in late summer, early fall, and finally, by the time they got everything worked out with the students, building the forms and setting those up, they poured the slabs in I want to say late November, and it dawned on me from a couple of our podcasts ago that somebody had asked a question on a frost protected shallow foundation if you could leave it exposed for the winter.
We should tell folks why. Is because the building is assumed to be a certain temperature, which helps keeps the slab warm, which in turn helps keep the ground from freezing. Is that right, Mike?
Mhm. Yeah. And here it was exposed for the whole winter, without having the building on top of it or any heat inside of it. Because at the stage they're at now, they're just finishing up the framing now, putting the siding on. So they've already gone through the whole winter, and the foundation worked just fine without any heat from the inside. And I think that had to do with well drained soil under
It
the
looks sandy, which has
foundation.
got to be
Yeah,
hugely helpful.
sandy
Yeah.
gravel. Yeah.
And it has exterior insulation. Is that right? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, so they're building at a level which is just like it's just below what passive house would be. I mean, they're between the windows they're using at the U factors that are out those windows and the insulation, both cavity insulation with 2x6 advanced framed walls with, I think they're using 2.5 inches of exterior foam on that. They're getting pretty close, and they're targeting below 1 air change per hour. So, and I'll bet they'll get down around zero point 0.5 air changes per hour.
And can I say the quality is really good? They are doing a good job. The house looks really professional.
It is, and the students, when I was talking with their instructor Dave, and as the students would come up and ask a question, they're doing the soffit with the vinyl soffit, and they're like, okay, so the student comes up and he says, so I trimmed all these and I'm checking, and there's a little bit of a curve on the inside of the F channel, that receiver, and I'm noticing that we're pinching the panel a little bit. I think I got to take another, like 3/16 off. To have somebody and these are juniors now because the seniors have all graduated. These are juniors, been in the program for 2 years, and they're already thinking about all the little things that a good carpenter would think about, when they're testing a sample to make sure that they're not going to, cut 10,000 of them at the wrong length, checking that first one. So, yeah, really
I
good
think
to
it
see
took me
that.
10 years to learn to do that. Mark, what have you been doing?
What have I been doing? I've been trying to get some grass seed down, but I'm just getting ready to start a small little deck for the mother-in-law suite over there. Just a little 8 by 10. The rest of the house is slab on grade, but hers, because of the slope and the terrain, we had to bump it up and put a crawl space underneath it. So her back door doesn't walk right out to grade, so it's probably, I don't know, 2 feet down. And I was thinking about building in the whole back area is going to be kind of one big patio eventually once the ground settles, probably next year. I'll start that. But in the meantime, I'm thinking, if instead of just doing stairs, they would kind of look, I'm just going to do a little deck so she can walk out there and have a little seat, and there'll be a bigger patio area eventually. But so little 8 by 10 deck, fun little project. You know what? Actually, you just reminded me. I got a question for you guys. So the stairs are coming down. I've only worked with composite decking maybe a few times. I've built stairs anyway. So there are a couple ways you can do stairs. You can either run the treads longer and have them kind of overhang the last stringer there that you cap with the skirt board, or you can kind of run the skirt board so it kind of hides the stringers, it buries them in there. And that's the way I've done my other composite decks that I've worked with. I'd rather see the treads on this case. So what do you do when you have the PVC? I'm probably used a cap composite, and sometimes they're just a goofy shape. So how do you hide that goofy shape? Have you dealt with this, Mike or Pat?
Usually that end stringer, the outside stringers, you either block them in or do a double stringer so you can run a miter on your stair treads. So this tread material, the composite decking, if it's usually going to be two pieces. So the innermost piece would actually be cut short by about 5 inches or 4.5 inches on the left and the right side. And then the outer piece would wrap right around it, kind of like doing a border board around a deck.
I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm following. So we're talking just stair treads.
Right, just the treads. Yeah.
So there's no skirt board. So the skirt board on either side of the stringer is cut the same shape of the stringer, and the tread is
Yep.
sticking out further, right? So and there's two boards. There's two deck boards per tread.
Yep.
And explain that to me again. I'm sorry, I didn't follow that.
Yeah,
Did you get that,
so
Patrick?
Imagine your stair stringers or your stair treads are the top of your deck.
Yep.
And you're going to have the board along the outside edge of the stringer at the riser point, which would be sort of like your rim board of the deck. And where your end of the deck is, you're going to miter that board, and you're going to run a board in all the way back to your house on the deck. So it sort of trims it off around the perimeter.
Okay.
And you
So
do the
you need
same
so you
thing
need a
on
little
the-
extra.
Can I try and
blocking.
paraphrase that a little bit to make sure it's clear for everybody? Because I'm not sure I understand, and I'm guessing there are other folks out there. So the tread is made of two boards. The one that's the nosing, you're going to put a 45 at the outside corners so you can return a small piece back
Yep.
to the riser. Is that correct? Okay.
So then your stringers, you have to line the stringers up in such a way that everything's falling on some fastenable, you
You're
have to
going
have
to
some
need some
type of
blocking in there, dude. Yeah.
Yeah, blocking. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so how many stringers do you have?
Oh, it's going to be 3 at the most.
Okay, so 3. So you'd end up solid blocking between them,
Okay.
or you have to cut an additional one to have just inside of the outer ones to pick
receive
up
that return,
joint.
to receive the inside edge of that return,
Yeah.
right, Mike? Yeah.
That's perfect. That's it's funny because I searched this on Google and I did not see that system. So we just found our next Ask the Expert in the magazine. Sorry for
And an illustration would fix all of
usually
my
helpful,
awkward
yeah.
words and description.
Jeff, you've been on a tear too.
Yeah, well, I said I was going to work on the deck guardrail, so I did that. So
It looks beautiful.
the posts are in, so now it's the cross
That's
pieces.
the hard part, right?
Yeah. The rest is pretty straightforward carpentry.
They're a very
And what
dark
kind
color.
of-
What is the material? What is it?
It's cedar, but it's stained to match the composite decking.
It looks beautiful.
Thank you.
And what did you do? And you're doing you know what? I couldn't open that file, Jeff. It was kind of a weird.
Oh yeah, Jeff has
Oh.
got an iPhone, and
Yeah, sorry.
Apple
Oh, you know
needs
what?
their own photo format for some reason.
Yeah. So I didn't see it, but you mentioned that you were doing a cable, right? And you're still
Yeah.
going with the cable. Did you find a system that did you know you already have the system that you're going with?
Yeah.
Is it one that you just mount the little buckled or the little turnbuckle things on the posts, or do you have to drill through the posts on the other side? How does that work?
So the posts are drilled. So I'm going with the Feeney cable rail system.
Okay.
So there's a screwed end, or an end with a screw on it for tightening, and then a little keeper on the other end that traps the cable when it runs through the post.
It's amazing. You look at those things like, oh, these are only like a couple bucks a piece, and then you start adding them up, and how many? Jeez, this isn't as cheap as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
I made an observation on the weekend that like every trip to the home center I make now costs $100. I don't know why that is, but it's somehow doubled in the last couple years. Is my observation.
I only had to do
speaking
two over the weekend.
Did it cost $200?
No, actually, it was like $30 the first time and like 10 the second time. Or no, that's
I'm
not
taking
true.
you with me to the home center next time I go, Jeff. That's
No,
gonna help.
actually, it was 40 because I bought the caps for the posts, little LED caps for the 3 posts.
I'm going to keep it brief because we got to get the show rolling, but I got to ask the experts question too, and I'm hoping folks who listen to the show might weigh in. So I'm running a propane line to power a wall furnace, a Renai wall furnace to heat the barn, so I don't have to rely so much on the wood stove. The wood stove would be backup exclusively. And if you're going to run a gas line on the outside of a building, there's a couple options. You can run propane in soft copper, 5/8 OD tubing, and you use flare fittings to make the connections. The other option is black steel pipe, which is commonly used with gas lines and propane. It's very tough. It will rust. It's not rust protected. So what would you do, and why? I'm curious.
Why not shielded? You can't run shielded? The shielded line?
CSST, Mark, is that what you're talking about? Corrugated stainless steel tubing? Yeah, you could totally do that. I'm not a fan.
Why not?
Lightning strikes.
Really? So you can't, because
they can be bonded, and it's I think that's been worked out, and it's also super expensive compared to the other two options. I have a pipe threader. I have a newly purchased pipe vise. Running steel pipe is a lot of work, but it's not taxing mentally in any way. I think I stunned you guys with this question a little bit.
I would go with copper, but I guess I don't have a good reason why. That's just where my brain goes. I would just roll out copper, just because it's easier, probably, I guess, and fast.
Mike?
How much, like, what distance are we talking from point to?
A good question. About 20 feet. About 20 feet.
Is it straight, or have you got a bunch of elbows and corners?
I got like a U-shaped arrangement. I got a turn close to where the bottom will be that then goes about 18 feet and then comes right into the building where the heater is.
Is this going to be exposed, or are you going to bury it in the ground a few inches?
It's going to be under a deck, and that brings me to my next question.
Okay.
Do you use straps and put it on the bottom of the joists, or do you drill holes and run it through? I could run it through the sides easily, and arguably this would be easier, or at least less taxing physically, because I could just unscrew a deck board and do it from the top side, right?
So your deck's how far off the ground?
Oh, it's very close to the ground, Mark. So at the building, it's only a few inches. At the other side, the pier side, is probably 12, 14 inches.
Yeah, then going through the side would be a lot easier, probably.
So if it wasn't going to be covered by the deck, most of the run, I would have gone with the black pipe, just because it's going to be more resilient if somebody comes along with a weed whacker or kicks it or runs a lawnmower up against it. But if it's going to be mostly like under that deck or through the deck joist, then running the copper would be protected, would be safe.
Right.
On my shop, I ran, and
about
the copper, it's hard to make it look good too. So it's just kind of, it just kind of looks a little wonky. So when I did my shop, I had to run it, my tank, I had a propane tank, and there was like a 10-foot place where I had to bury it, and then it went up the wall a little bit. And I just used a Schedule 40, PVC, conduit, actually electrical conduit, for that space that it ran up the wall, just to protect it.
Just to hide it. You ran the tubing in that.
Well, not even just to hide it, but from mowers and whatever.
Yep.
Yeah.
I wondered if there's a risk of galvanic corrosion with the steel pipe and the copper treated floor joists I have for my deck, because it's wet, right? If it was dry, I wouldn't worry about it.
It's probably going to be negligible.
Yeah.
For the thickness of the wall thickness. You'll get a bit of corrosion on it, but if I was running black pipe, I would still put a coating on it. Put a rust preventative paint on while you've got it out and exposed after you've done your threading at the ends.
So once I dry fit it, take it apart, paint it, and put it back together. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what.
What color do I paint it, Mike?
I would go with. Well, it's going to be concealed underneath, so you could go with any color. You won't really see it, but otherwise, I go with black myself.
Listeners, do you have any opinion on what I should paint the gas line?
Yellow.
Right?
So everybody knows it's gas.
Boy, we heard from our listeners. You guys are fantastic. This comes from Paul. I'm one of your many overseas listeners. I'm a British carpenter living in Denmark, In episode 565, Overcoming Soul Bashing Work, the answer for me is podcast, podcast, podcast. When faced with a soul bashing project, the reality is the job just needs doing. My solution is just knuckle down and get it done while listening to others' opinions on a given subject via a podcast. What is it better than being entertained and learning whilst undertaking work? The other huge benefit, as you guys discussed, you can save a fortune. I listened to episode 565 whilst loading my trailer with the old concrete sewer and rainwater pipe from the site of the new house that I'm building for my family. Yes, the job sucked. Did I want to think about what passed through the old pipes? No. Was there a certain aroma at times leaching from the pipework? Possibly. But at the end, I knew I'd be saving a boatload of money. Doing the jobs that are labor-intensive or unpleasant is not often fun, but the payoff is money saved or money earned, depending on the situation. Like my old boss said to me when I was a newly qualified carpenter many years ago, and we were doing some unpleasant jobs, the work might stink, but the money in your pocket has no smell. Man, that guy was as tough as old boots, but truer words have not been spoken. I'll be building as much of my new house as I can on my own. It takes me a full week of work to pay for another contractor for one day. This is due to our high tax system. But the huge benefit is my wife has given me carte blanche to purchase any tools or equipment I'll need for the build. So recent purchases have included upgrading to a Makita high-pressure nail gun, replacing worn-out tools with newer, more up-to-date tools, all in the knowledge that I am ultimately saving money and I will have the tools to play with after the house is finished. I love the show. You can see my new house build on Instagram. You can find me at Scandy Carpenter. I'll be documenting the build process of our new house on there. At the moment, we're still in the ground. Regards, Paul. Paul, thanks very much for writing in. What do you guys think?
I think that one thing I missed most about when I went from the job site world to the office world was the colorful sayings that you hear on the job site. And sometimes not repeatable on a podcast, but
often.
Yeah. There's always words of wisdom that people are sharing.
That was great. I never get tired of hearing that we have international listeners. That is super cool.
Yeah. And just doing things, he's doing just there's satisfaction in doing it yourself. And even with those projects where you're 3/4 of the way through and say, why the hell did I do this myself when I could have saved in the long run time and money? But you know what? It's strange to me. I have a family member who shall go nameless, but he's going to, and they're not super wealthy, or they're just very middle class, and they're replacing a deck with a patio. They're putting a patio, removing a deck, putting in a patio. And I said, well, I come over and help you remove the deck. Oh, I'm not removing the deck. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm going to have somebody come in and do all. It's like, you're not even, and it was just so foreign to me that somebody would remove their own. I mean, you don't have to be a carpenter to remove your deck.
What are you talking about? You're not going to take off the deck yourself.
I couldn't. I still don't understand. That's not ever been the way I think about things.
So I was installing this heater in my barn on Monday, and the hardest part is drilling a 3 1/8-inch hole through the side of the building in the right spot so it's easy to hook up when you're done, right? And I've done a lot of that work in my career now, and it doesn't sweat me out too much. But if I knew what a pain in the butt that was going to be, I might have considered paying someone, right? And I said to Carol, oh my God, if I knew this was going to be such a hassle, I had to go to the home center to buy a hole saw, all of it, I might have hired someone. She's like, no, you wouldn't, because she's like, it would have cost $1,000, and the guy would have come out and charged you $35 to tell you he didn't want the job.
Right.
Yes. And
or you wouldn't have been satisfied the way. I would have done it way different than that.
And the amount of time you spend talking to somebody to get them to come out, and then they don't show up on time, and then you have to call somebody else, and then all of that. It's almost quicker to do it yourself when you get right down to it, despite the headache.
The interesting thing about that is it requires a bunch of different skills. You got to have carpentry chops, you got to have plumbing chops, you got to have some electrical chops if you don't have an outlet there, all of it, right? It's like, I bet that's really expensive to find that person who can do all those things, if it's just one. This comes from our friend Dave in Vermont. The local news service here just ran an article about spray foam and some of the negative experiences folks around here are having with it. Thought you might find it interesting or pertinent. I haven't read the entire piece yet. It's a bit long, and now that building season is heated up in earnest, I find I have not enough time for, well, basically anything. So Dave linked to a article on people who've had spray foam problems, and we've heard about this on GBA and other places, and it is not an easy fix. I'll link that in the podcast page. Any thoughts on that, fellas? Have you heard about these situations where components of spray foam don't fully react and leave lingering smells or voids? And
Yeah, I wrote a piece on spray foam a while ago, and I mean, it's mostly either in the equipment malfunctioning or probably the two biggest things. Well, when spray foam fails, it's oftentimes it shouldn't be used because there was some problem. It's trying to cover up whether it's a leak or something like that, which just needs to be fixed
or
first.
it's sprayed in the wrong conditions. If it's too wet,
Yes,
too cold,
wet,
too
cold,
hot,
it's too dusty. Yeah. It's yes. And the other thing is, I think one of the biggest mistakes from what I saw was people putting on the lifts too thick. I mean, if you
that
go
started
fill
a huge
6-inch
fire
cavity,
here in Connecticut. A very famous case where these folks were spraying on a hot day, and they set this very big, expensive house on fire. And it was notable because the home was being built for the president of the company that does a lot of weatherization work in here in Connecticut. And, that seems like not the best press.
No, yeah, because if you spray it, 6 inches thick in one lift, that inside it doesn't cure and it stinks and off gases, honestly, forever. I mean, I don't know that it ever stops.
You have to scrape it out manually, right? Which you can imagine what that costs, the labor-intensive nature of that. Woo.
I mean, spray foam is basically the same as like an XPS foam. I mean, they're almost identical, aren't they? As how they're put the closed cell and XPS. Are they pretty close to being the same thing?
Go ahead, Mike. You were shaking your head.
I don't think they are, but I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I better bite my tongue.
Because I know they're both closed cell.
At least if you're having XPS, when XPS is being made, at least it's being done in controlled environments where they know what the reaction is going to be, and they're extruding it out into the sizes they want. Whereas with the spray foam, like you say, the ideal lift might be 2.5 to 3.5 inches, but if they're doing 6 just to speed up the process, now you get the problems.
And
I can say that spray foam is polyurethane plastic, and XPS is polystyrene, so they're at least different compounds.
Because I mean, the only reason I brought that up is because you don't hear about that rigid foam board failing. And if they were the exact same thing, then you would almost say that, it's the installation that's, the main problem.
I would say it's installation or site conditions, right? It's because you're not making it in a factory in a controlled environment. It's a chemical reaction you're making from a truck, right? And spraying it outside, what amounts to outside.
I agree.
And so many builders have landed on spray foam as a cure-all for achieving the energy or complying with the energy conservation code that are being enforced in a lot of states, rather than doing the air sealing steps to air seal the house to meet their air changes per hour requirement. They say, I'm just going to have somebody come in and spray foam the whole house and it all be done. And there are some problems if they don't understand what they're getting. And even I've seen good experienced spray foam installers have problems, and usually they're putting the wall board up a few days later, so they're not seeing what the ramifications are. Yeah.
I would say if you're going to have it done, try and do it on a nice day. It's not too hot, not too cold, not too wet.
Right. And if you live in Minnesota, that's basically 3 days. So
which 3 days are those?
Right, exactly.
This comes from Orange Cat on Green Building Advisor. I thought it was a really interesting question, so I thought I would share it with y'all. HE washers, high efficiency washers, are great for energy and water efficiency, but they vibrate more than top loaders. For a wood frame house, 2x6 walls, what is the best way to minimize worry about vibration from a front loading washing machine? A Miele W1753 if it matters. The installation manual says a concrete floor is the most suitable installation surface for a washing machine, being far less prone to vibration than during the spin cycle than wooden floorboards or a carpeted surface. The machine must be level and securely positioned. To avoid vibrations during spinning, the machine should not be installed on soft floor coverings. If installing on a wooden floor joist, we recommend a plywood base, at least 59 by 52 by 3 centimeters. The base should span several joists and be bolted to the joist and not only the floorboards. Check for the presence of pipes and cables first, if possible. It doesn't say that, actually. It says, check for the presence of pipes and cables first, period. If possible, install the machine in a corner, as this is usually the most stable part of the floor. What do you guys think? Are these reasonable recommendations to install this washing machine?
You know what? I have a top. So when we moved into the house recently, we bought new machines. I don't know if they're officially high efficiency. I think they may be. But it's not even just the vibration. Those things are freaking loud. I mean, they're just, when they change, I mean, it's just, wow. I mean, it's unbelievable how loud they are. So I made the mistake. So one thing, yes, adding joists, but you know what, I'm not so sure, Mike can probably speak to this a little better, that if I don't know, adding more lumber, how much it's going to reduce the vibration because it's going through that lumber. So it's not...
And at 3 millimeters, which is less than a quarter of an inch, like, what the heck is that doing? It's not adding mass. It might be like load sharing.
3 centimeters, so we're talking about 1.125 inches.
Oh, not millimeters, my bad. Excuse
centimeters.
Me. Yeah.
So it's about 1.125 inches, 1 3/16. So yeah, it would have a little bit of a benefit. But that size they're talking about, the plywood 59 by 52, that's much bigger than the actual washing machine size. So I don't know how that's going to work. You're basically putting a big snowshoe underneath which is going to be projecting out in front of the washer.
And you're going to be tripping on it. And yeah, that seems, I didn't understand that as either. So, I mean, there's
here's
the
question.
mass.
Okay. Here's a question. Can you, if you were framing this house, and this house I think is under construction, could you let in that additional thickness layer and then sheathe on top of it? Or is that worse because you're now shrinking the depth of the saw and lumber joist? Yeah.
And if you're using I-joist or open web floor trusses, you're not going to be shaving anything. Or if you do,
No.
you can end up with a disaster.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just, because it's a vibration, adding more solid components, just, I mean, I think it would help for sure, but I just don't know that it's.
You need mass to counteract this.
Yeah.
So I've seen the insides of a Miele washer that builders show, and it is got this amazing cast iron casting that holds the drum and the motor and stuff. And the cheaper versions of these machines have concrete blocks in them for the same reason, because there is so much energy when this thing is spinning wet clothes. And it's often off balance, so that's why it goes bananas when it's in the spin cycle.
There's a real easy solution for this. Just get a high efficiency top loading machine. I bought one 25 years ago, a Fisher Paykel out of New Zealand. They were one of the first to come up with the high efficiency direct drive motors back in the, 80s. They were one of the first. And that thing ran for at least 20 years before electronics went on it. And it was quiet. It didn't have any shifting problems because of the direct drive motor, and it never went out of balance. I guess I don't know what the Miele problem is. I've had a couple.
Well, mine is a Samsung, and it shakes the house. I had to put a telepost under the floor joist because I thought it was going to go through the floor.
Is it a vertical axis or horizontal?
No, it's horizontal. Yeah,
okay.
It's horizontal. And what do you think is different about the vertical? I mean, the energy is still there.
Maybe because it can go laterally, and maybe the load almost self-balances, whereas when you've got a horizontal axis, and the clothes themselves might be kind of lumped down to the bottom when that spin starts. They're not evenly distributed. Maybe with a vertical axis, the clothes are somewhat evenly distributed. Because I know what would happen if the Fisher-Paykel, if I recall right, if it felt like it was out of balance, it would stop spinning and it would do a little dance. It would like jiggle the clothes on the inside to kind of get them to even out, and then it would start the spin cycle again. So maybe it was a self-correcting feature. Maybe not all washers have that, but
Well, mine does that too. If
it
it gets
does
out
it.
of wonk, it slows down and it kind of tumbles them more gently, so they kind of break up that big mass, and then
Yeah.
it starts ramping up slowly. And if it's okay, it'll go faster and faster until I think this thing spins to close to 1,200 RPM.
So the other things to consider are the floor. I mean, to put a layer of Duro rock and some thicker tile down below it is going to add some mass to that. And the other thing I would recommend to do what I didn't do is my washer and dryer right off the dining room, because it's kind of a pantry / laundry. And because it's a kitchen dining room area, I didn't want a door swinging out or in, so I put a barn door there, and it looks great. However, barn doors do not block sound hardly. So if you're still in the planning stages where you can decide what kind of door, even if you're going hollow core to save money other places, you might want to consider a solid door on that room, and just some steps to insulate the walls. Keep electrical cavities separate, or outlets on the same cavity. There's other ways to quiet a room. So I mean, if it's just the noise you're worried about, there's things you can do there.
One of the GBA posters, I believe it was on this subject, mentioned that you can get these like kind of isolation pads that can actually be tuned with their durometer rating, their squishiness, to counteract certain frequencies. And if you got the right formula for your washing machine, it would help to uncouple that machine, which is like shaking your entire house. That is the issue you're dealing with, and that is sound that's very hard to control, right, Mark?
Yeah, mine. And it's funny with mine. So mine's on a slab, so it's not the vibration you feel. It's just the noise of the thing changing cycles, and I don't know. I don't know what it's doing in there, but it seems like the less energy it uses, the more noise it makes.
Well,
Jeff, you have thoughts on this?
Because I have a front-loading high efficiency, and I actually built a platform to raise it up, mostly because I kept hitting my head on the door when I was trying to empty it. But, and that's got 2x12s running, parallel, perpendicular to the existing floor joists. I mean, it bounces around pretty good, but it stays put. But it is noisy.
Have you thought about filling that box with sand or concrete to dampen it?
No, I don't think it's the box that makes the noise. I think it's just the washer itself. When it starts, as you say, when it's off balance, it'll pound pretty loud sometimes.
Well, if you folks out there listening have any thoughts on this subject, I'd love to hear them, because I've heard this and I live it too. We have to run laundry when Carol's not podcasting or has meetings, and we definitely don't run them at night because our house is so small it'll wake you out of a sound sleep.
Well, one of the other GBA commenters suggested some large concrete pavers and putting those down just to add mass underneath the washer in that area. So I don't know if somebody wants to go to the trouble of getting the anti-vibration mats or go to that extent, but maybe just a simple solution for an existing house without having to do reframing or building up a box is just to put some pavers that fit right underneath that washer.
It's a common problem. This comes from our FHB forum. It's from the engine guy. Hello, quick background. I build racing engines for the last 30 years. I live in a world of 1/10,000th of an increment, so I see things differently. I ripped off the deck from the home we bought 3 years ago. They simply nailed the ledger to the siding in some places. In other places, they removed the cedar. I have one area here on the left side that is a bit soft. 95% of it is solid. Do I really need to replace this? Both 45-degree angles are solid. Any insight would be great. I was quoted $27,000 for a new deck that we wanted, but I can keep a 5-inch hole straight, top to bottom, within 2/10,000ths of an inch, over 6 inches. I can build a deck. He's right too. So he's got what, a 45-degree angle bay that bumps into this deck. Is that a good way to describe this, gentleman?
Yep.
Yep,
Yeah.
a full angle bay bump out from floor to ceiling. Yeah.
So as far as the wood goes, it's hard to tell in a photo because I mean, if you pull siding or cladding or anything off of anything, it's not going to look pristine. So it's one of those things where you take a sharp screwdriver or an awl and kind of start poking at it to really get a sense of how much meat is there. So
From both sides, if you can reach it, right? You want to
Yeah.
know how far it reaches in if it's there.
And the other thing is I've seen when people put decks on these bays, sometimes the way these bays are constructed, it's really difficult to attach find the proper places to put those ledgers. So, and if that's covered up in the basement and you're not confident that you're sinking into something more than, something structural that's not going to pull that whole thing down, you might want to throw a post under that area. Wouldn't be a bad idea.
So the building code doesn't even allow us to connect a ledger to those cantilever joists.
Oh.
Yeah, overhanging joists are a no-no, right? There's no
Yeah.
detail for that connection.
Because the rim joist is probably only nailed or maybe screwed on, so it's not going to be supportive into the end grain of the house joists. And the way that set up that this person has, there's not much wall to the left and the right of where the bump out is. He's only got maybe 18 inches on the left and the right, which wouldn't be enough to fasten a ledger and then put like a header across in front of that.
Right.
So the way it looks to me, to solve any moisture problems, to solve any structural problems, is just do it as a freestanding deck. He's only a foot off the ground there. And like you're saying, Mark, to put some posts there, you just put a little beam and a couple footings, and you just cantilever the joist towards the house, and then another beam on the opposite side to cantilever away from the house, and yeah, done. Then you leave a couple of an inch space to the house from the framing, and it's plenty well supported by the beams and the footings, and you don't have any flashing problems or anything else.
One word of caution, engine guy, is the soil just on the outside of your house. The grade often contains pipes, wires, stuff, sewer lines. Be very careful digging the posts for those posts or the piers for the post is going to support the ledger side of your deck that you're going to add. So you just got to be careful where you're digging, that you don't put a shovel through, a pipe or a wire that's going to be a expensive and complicating factor. Ask me how I know.
The siding. So if you can imagine, if you're not seeing the photos, he's torn the siding off. So there's a couple rows of siding missing. And honestly, if there's going to be a deck right there, adding 6 inches of corner posts and siding, I mean, you could just put like a freeze board there and you're not going to see it and it's going to look fine. It's going to be a heck of a lot easier, but make sure you flash, you want to, if you're not tucking something, if you're adding a freeze board type detail, you want to trim that and flash it just like you would a ledger board. So which means tucking some flanges underneath there, and
a drip cap, right? You need a drip cap on that water table, right? Is that what you're saying?
And Mike's got probably the best videos in the planet on how to do that on the website. So that'd be a good place to start.
And one thing that that engine guy didn't mention, but the photograph depicts, is a dryer vent coming out of the wall, and that's something that anybody who has a dryer vent coming out at the ledger board of your deck, you really want to take a look at that and maybe figure out a way to reroute that dryer exhaust on the inside of the building so it goes out in a different spot, because
it's going to rot the deck.
Well,
yeah.
Well, you're never going to be able to get to it to clean it, to maintain it. So that vent hood is going to just collect all of that, and you can see it in the photograph. You can see all the lint that's collected there, and over time, it's going to just plug itself up. Also, another way to do it is to run a duct pipe all the way through the joist bay and exhaust it at the rim joist of the deck. but then you're starting to get into the maximum amount of linear footage that
Well,
you
and I would
can
think
have.
a more fundamental problem is too is like if you live in a cold place and it's cold outside, you
Yeah.
got condensation in that dryer
Yep,
event because it's now outside, right? And it
all kinds of problems.
could
Yeah.
plug up with water.
So ideally, reroute it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one other mention is it looks like there's some existing WRB there, maybe a tie vac.
Mhm.
So you should, continue that down, and don't forget to do the bottom the bottom of the bay as well. It looks like it's not going to be much fun, but you should do it.
Yeah, it's a good opportunity to do it before the new deck goes on because that's not only going to protect that underside from rotting out, it's also going to help to air seal that it's often a leaky spot when you get those cantilevered bay windows.
Those are notorious air leakage spots. They're seldom done correctly. Yep.
So that's a way we could get from a deck to air sealing all in one answer.
Come for the deck, stay for the air sealing. That's what I say. Let's get to Brandon here quickly. Hey, FHP podcast. First off, I love the show. I'm a newer homeowner who's beginning to plan renovations and improvements to my 1960s duplex in Northern California, Climate Zone 3. I grew up helping with renovation projects, but just recently started heavily researching building science. I'm interested in improving the energy efficiency and honestly the comfort of my home. I've not had a blower door test done, but I can assure you the rating would be Swiss cheese. One of the challenges that I see for future air sealing and insulation will be my floor system. Like many houses of the area in the region, my house has a vented crawl space and cold floors in the winter. To remedy this issue, I figured good air sealing and insulation would be the solution. The challenge I'm having is that my old floor system consists of 4x6 joists, 48 inches on center, and my subfloor is tongue and groove planks that I figure are as airtight as my sandals are waterproof. We got the smartest people who listen to this show. This is hilarious. The oak flooring above is likely tighter, but unlikely to be what you would call high performance. Most details I've encountered call for air sealing the rim joists fully, adding fluffy insulation between them. I have two challenges here. First, it does nothing to air seal the floor, and the second, the 48 inches on center makes fluffy stuff a pain in the butt. I came across the FHB Guide to Insulation for wood frame floor assemblies, which recommended fluffy stuff and tape sheets of rigid foam under the joists. I like this idea as it could tackle both my air sealing and insulation issues. This got me thinking about how my 48-inch on-center joists are the perfect size to just shove 3 layers of 2-inch foam into them instead of getting trapped like a fly in webs and netting for fluffy stuff in my 2-foot crawl space. Is this a sane idea? I can't find any examples of this detail and feel as though I'm clearly wrong about its feasibility if no one has done it. Or maybe no one has 48-inch on-center joists and thus bats are just far easier. That being said, I've been keen to learn why it might not work if it wouldn't. I think we're going to be able to answer 2 questions here. The easy way up would be spray foam the floor joist to get both air sealing and R value, but I want to leave it out as a last choice option for cost, maintenance, chemical/health, and global warming potential reasons. Anyways, I really appreciate everything y'all do. I'm slowly listening my way through the older episodes with a goal of listening to them all. Thanks, Brandon. So I'm guessing why folks don't use rigid insulation to solve this problem is it's very expensive, right? With this, that would be a spendy assembly.
But I mean, it would still be a little bit less than having somebody come in with a truck and spray it, but it wouldn't be that much less.
And I think why people use fluffy insulation is it's way less expensive. And if you have a taped air barrier to seal it on all 6 sides, it's just as effective as any other insulation. It's been demonstrated through research.
So your recommendation was spend more time on the air,
Well, I was only answering Brandon's question about why people don't do this. And, my rationale for many building decisions is I don't have the money to do it the way that would be easier. I have to do it the way that is,
Right.
affordable for me.
Well, another reason people might not do it in his case is if a house is framed with 16-inch on center floor joist, then putting in regular bats is conveniently sized. Here with the 48 on center, as he points out, it might be common in his area, but it's not, you know, universally a common framing for to have 48 on center 4x6s.
Hmm.
So in his case, to be able to just cut a little off the edge of a 4x8 sheet and put it up, the labor doesn't seem like it's that
No,
out of
and
whack.
I
What
agree.
about pipes and wires that are surely running through this floor system? What do you do about that?
There might be, but he didn't mention that, and it all depends. You know, a lot of crawl spaces that I've worked in, there aren't a lot of pipes and wires. It might be where there's a bathroom, there'll be
Mm.
pipes, but they usually didn't run the wiring through that crawl space. So you see the wiring running through the walls and through the attics more frequently. So
Well, an
Because no one wants to
electrician's
go
not
in
going
that
to
crawl
want
space, even when the house is being built,
to.
right? It's like
Exactly. Yep. It's like, wait a second, what's easier for me to get down there on my back and crawl or knees and crawl around, or get a little ladder and run it up through the top? But no,
well,
I don't see why it would
if there
work.
are pipes
And
in
to
there, the
hold it
wires
in
don't really
place,
matter. But if there are
yeah.
pipes in there, you got to keep them in the thermal envelope, right? You got to insulate below them and not so they're outside. Because you're saying California doesn't matter because it's not
he's in
cold
climate
enough.
zone 3, so they're probably don't see but a couple of days of below freezing weather there.
And in that, on that note, would one panel, a 2-inch panel, get them to the point where adding more is
Gosh, I'd
not?
at least try that, right? And because the air barrier improvement is going to be huge, and
Yeah.
as we all know, that makes a much bigger difference than fluffy insulation or even poorly installed rigid insulation.
I think that's a really good idea. Is rather than going to what the code would call for, which would be R19 for the zone 3, is just put in 1 inch of foam. And usually that you get the biggest bang for your buck out of that first R2 or R3. So 1 inch of foam is going to get you up to R3.5, and you're going to notice a big difference in the comfort.
Well, it's just a thermal break that it's creating. I mean, it makes a huge difference.
And stopping air, right? If you
Right.
can stop that air moving through that floor, that the air that's coming from the crawl space is outside. It's outside temperature. I'm sure it would reduce the cooling load too.
And you're gonna have to
But
get some poles, some like temporary 1x2s to hold those. Put some adhesive on it and get some little temporary poles to hold it in place. And
Could you put strapping over it and fasten it to the subfloor? Would that work?
I mean, you could put little angle brackets or blocks, maybe blocks of wood to hold it in place, but it's because it's not going to come down further than the joist. So strapping, you need some type of little angle. Yeah, little blocks would work actually too. Fine.
Yeah.
And if you know what the thickness of your flooring is, if there is any subflooring, it sounds like it's just oak flooring
Boards.
right over the joist. So if you get the screws and you dial in your depth, you can just screw in so it's going just a 1/2 inch or even 3/8 of an inch.
No, so he has tongue and groove subfloor planks and then oak flooring above. So
Okay,
I
so
think
he
you could
should be able to
just
go
yeah,
right into the subfloor
just screw into
with
the subfloor.
screws, and that takes care of that. And put some adhesive on there,
Mike,
and
what are
that
those
way.
giant plastic washers that folks use for EIFs? Is it what suppliers Windlock sells big plastic discs that would be perfect for this? I don't know. That might be overkill, but it'd be kind of fun.
Well, you can buy the preloaded cap screws for that we put foam on the outside. Well, same as what you're talking about, the Windlock, but they're just a 1 inch cap. And you can get them preloaded at different length screws or different like nails if you wanted to drive a nail in. So there's a bunch of different products out there to do it.
And it wouldn't take too many to keep that up there, I'm guessing.
No, not if you're using adhesive, just four per
Mm.
board or whatever.
And the easy way to cut and cobble that in is you make sure that you leave a little bit of a gap around the edge, maybe a 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch.
3/8 is ideal in my experience. 3/8 is the perfect amount.
And then what do?
Fill it with foam.
Fill it with canned foam. Yeah. With a pro style gun. And you might have to buy one every couple years because they seem to suck. But
You know what? I've had one for like 15 years, and I just can't believe it still works.
what's your secret?
You know what? I do clean it. I always have the cleaner, the acetone next to it, so I wipe the tip every time I'm done using it. So
But you leave a foam can on it without cleaning the inside. Is that correct?
you know what? I never actually clean the inside. I only clean the tip. Yeah, the foam stays on there. It's been not years at a time, but certainly for 6 months at a time. But yeah, for
far
a job like
superior
this,
tool, right?
get this, spend the money on the Pro Gun. You're going to want one.
Especially for a job of this scale, right? That would be, it's
Yeah.
going to be so much better. The other great thing about the Pro Style gun is, you know, the cheap cans, you have to keep them upside down. And if you're working in a basement over your head, how's that work? Right? It is like the can gets in the way for what you're doing.
Right. And being able to set the speed is what I probably like the most. So when you're,
The adjustable
instead of
bead,
having
yeah.
to like feather the trigger on the little guns and you're blasting, 5 times more than you need, to be able to set the trigger on a Pro Gun and just go is nice.
I found an interesting news item I'm going to share with you guys. This was in my Facebook feed. Marion, Illinois, a southern Illinois man has been charged with theft for allegedly stealing a backhoe to drive about 10 miles to an airport to catch a flight, authorities said. Security camera footage shows a Carbondale man arriving at Veterans Airport in southern Illinois atop a backhoe and leaving it in the airport parking lot Thursday. The Williams County Sheriff's Office said footage captured the man walking across the street from the lot to the airport lobby carrying a guitar case. The sheriff's officials said. The owner of the backhoe arrived at the airport a short time later and identified the equipment as belonging to his company. The owner said the machine, typically used to move large debris, had been parked at his job site. Timothy J. Baggett of Carbondale, Illinois, was arrested Sunday in Elko County, Nevada, for charges related to possession of a stolen vehicle. He was later released. Baggett was arrested again Monday in Wells, Nevada, for charges related to possession of additional stolen vehicles. He's currently being held in the Elko County Jail on $40,000 bond. They formally filed charges on Tuesday.
I'm guessing there was alcohol involved.
I just love that you can just drive this thing up and park it and like, if you act like you're supposed to be doing that, who was going to say a word, right?
Yeah, you put your hazards on and nobody would know that you're not supposed to be there.
If he'd just like put some cones at the front and back of it, it would have been there when he came home.
Right? Yeah. But the idea that nobody's going to, eventually figure out, who it was that stole this thing is probably not clear thinking at the time, I wouldn't think.
I love the story. It was so funny. And I watched the screen grab of him walking across the sidewalk with the guitar. It's just like, he just looked like he owned the place. It was amazing. So, great show, guys. Thank you.
It was fun.
Any parting words?
After show.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about the after show. So today's after show is called That's Not My Job, and it relates to the construction tasks that are not any of your subs problems and usually fall to the GC or they fall through the cracks. So we're going to share those things that have probably occurred in our projects and we've seen in others when everyone points at someone else and says, well, that's not my problem. So I think it should be a fun conversation, and I hope you all will join us. If you are already a all-access member to Fine Homebuilding, thank you very much for your support. Stay tuned for the show, and I hope others will consider joining Fine Homebuilding All Access. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to Mark, Mike, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com, and please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Happy building. Nice show, guys. Thanks.